David, a security guard in his middle years being employed at a big mall, was his days were routine because he was accustomed to occupied with keeping an eye on the busy throng to make sure everyone was safe. But one day, something altered while going about his regular tasks. He discovered a little girl who her parents were lost in the crowd. Didn't realize it at the time, but assistance this young person would go far. Greater than anything he could have ever envisioned. What started out as a straightforward act of kindness will provide the conditions for a life-altering incident in a matter of hours later. Welcome to Mystic, everyone. Greetings, Tales. I'm thrilled to present a brand new narrative with you. David had been employed as working as a security guard for almost 8 years, felt the same every day. The buzzing of there was a steady hum in the mall. His life's history. He would stand monitoring customers for hours. David had to make sure there was no difficulty. He had always been a straightforward man, but pursuing glory, fortune, or notoriety, he simply desired a steady work to help pay for his family. He would frequently consider how his eye only wanted a steady job, how his life had changed after he had big dreams of something more thrilling, more daring. But those aspirations waned. His wife, Linda, and him were overcome by reality. To him, their 2 children were everything, and ensuring their safety and well-being was his upper first of all. He wasn't unhappy. He simply believed that there wasn't much more to life planned for him on a specific Tuesday. The afternoon didn't feel any different from he stood beside the mall's main monitoring the throng at the entrance, hurried in and out carrying shopping bags. Families went between shops, and the laughter of kids reverberated throughout the space. But in the midst of the cacophony, David seen a young girl doing something strange. Was little older than 5 or 6 years old. By herself, standing close to the escalators. Her eyes were wide with fear as she looked everywhere in an attempt to find. David's instincts kicked in with someone. Slowly walked up to her, being careful not to, "Hey there," frighten her. He whispered quietly, "Are you all right?" I'm kneeling to her level. "Where is your mother?" "Dad." The girl's mouth quivered, and she started crying. "I lost them." Started to form in her eyes. She murmured, "I lost them, but I'm not sure." David sensed her anxiety, which reminded him of his own children at that age, so young and defenseless. He took her hand without hesitation. Calmly, "Don't worry. We'll locate them." "What's your name?" "Alice," she said, in an unsteady, "All right, okay." "Alice, let's head to the Alice Security Department, and we'll provide you with some assistance." As they navigated the crowded, David couldn't help but notice the hallways. How many people were overly preoccupied with their own universes to observe the terrified? He firmly grasped the young girl's hand, directing her through the throng with resolve to bring her back to her family once. They arrived at David's security office, spoke with the main desk of the mall, and made a notice to all customers: "If you are not here, we have a lost child. Please come to see a young child named Alice." The office of security, as they waited right away. David kept fading panic. He gave Alice a juice box when they were together, out of the vending machine, and even permitted he watch her play with a tiny toy bear. Had on his desk, and gradually she started to calm down her earlier panic after what seemed like an eternity. Fading a couple, and a panic hurried into the office. Alice's mother, crying uncontrollably, she was taken in her arms by her face. In her voice, she said, "Thank you so much." Emotionally charged, "We were so..." David nodded in fear, glad that Alice, we were terrified, was with her folks again. "And I'm simply happy she's safe," he said with a kind smile. But David was unaware that this small gesture of generosity would alter his life in ways he was never able to have envisioned. Later that night, as David got ready, he thought back on the day as he clocked out. Assisting Alice had made him realize why he accepted the position in the first place. It wasn't simply about loitering or maintaining order. It was about assisting individuals in creating confidence that everyone felt secure. And today, that the straightforward act of returning a lost child visiting her parents had made him feel as though contentment he hadn't experienced in a long time. As he grabbed his luggage and coat, Mr. Harper, his supervisor, walked, he was a stern man who was constantly concerned with the regulations and hardly shown any feeling. According to David, it was simply another regular check at the end of the shift, Mr. Harper remarked, halting as though he had a significant thought in mind. I learned about the events that transpired today, with the tiny David straightened up, although he wasn't sure. Harper paused and said yes. Sir, that's where the conversation was headed. We were able to locate her despite her being lost. Safely returning to her parents, Mr. Harper gave a nod. But something this time, his expression was different. Was excellent job, and you managed it well. David was a little surprised. Many thanks, sir. In this field of work, praises were uncommon. Work, particularly from Mr. Thank You Harper, sir. I just did what anyone would have no. Not all of them would have been. David kept talking. That considerate, I've been considering you. David Harper continued in a softer than normal voice. You spent a lot of time with us. Consistently dependable and performing your duties with a serene. David's head was unsure of what to say. Thank you, sir. He had never had higher expectations than a consistent salary from his employment. I thank you, sir. I'll try my finest. Mr. Harper inhaled deeply and took something from his pocket. Was a letter that I spoke with higher. There is a position available in management for a level of seniority within the security team, and I suggested you for it. I'm at a loss for words. David's eyes grew wide when he was promoted. Hadn't even considered going up the ranks. He'd always thought he'd simply remain in his present position till retirement. Sir, I'm not sure how to claim that you don't have to say anything correctly. Just give it some thought. Mr. Harper responded, giving him the envelope with the contents inside. Formal offer. Read it carefully. I believe you'll discover it's a notable advancement in both accountability and compensation. David was unable to speak. Speechless. The offer was entirely unexpected, and the only thing on his mind was how Alice was helped earlier in the day. Had in some way triggered this whole situation. Motion. Thank you, sir. I will most certainly take it. David was standing there when Mr. Harper departed, looking at the envelope for a while, and his hands were racing. Was this really the case? Occurring, he considered his family. On the manner in which this could benefit them, he hadn't even thought about previously. The advertising was more than just more money. Steadiness was the key. Capacity to offer improved opportunities for his children, and a means of at last feeling like though he was progressing in life. He departed the shopping center that evening. He departed the mall. A peculiar mixture of feelings. Thanks, excitement, and disbelief swirled. All he had done with her was assist a lost child. He believed anything was only a portion of his job. But it appeared that he was opening doors with his act of generosity. Never anticipated, he was driving home. The envelope was sitting on the car as he went home. The passenger seat beside him is a representation of how rapidly things may change in life, unexpected manners in which David came home that in the evening. His spouse Linda welcomed him as she sensed something at the door. His manner was unusual. He appeared a little stunned, like he was still taking it all in. She inquired about a lengthy day after noting the manner in which he held the envelope firmly in his yes. David, you might say that. Yes, you might say that, replied with a weak grinning. They took a seat at the kitchen table. Following the children's bedtime, and David finally talked about what had occurred. He told her all about how he had aided a missing toddler at the shopping center, the dialogue with Mr. Harper, and lastly, the surprise offer of a promotion. Linda's eyes grew wide as she heard promotion. David, that's amazing. That's amazing. Proud of David. You nodded, still attempting to wrap his thoughts about it all. Or just so suddenly, I never thought that this occurred. It's not as though I've been striving for a more senior role. I've always completed my job. Linda grinned broadly, and extended her hand to Linda. Grinned broadly. Grasp his hand, which is precisely the reason you're being acknowledged, David. You perform your duties, and you do it well. And you went above and above today. Beyond for that young girl. David peered down. David glanced at the packet below, and I haven't even opened it in front of him. However, I wanted to speak with you first. Linda said it gently. Let's examine this fresh, cautiously ripped, open opportunity. Appears similar to David taking a deep breath and carefully ripped the envelope open and extracted the letter while he perused it. The words senior security were scanned by eyes. The supervisor took on more duties. Substantial benefits of a pay increase bundle. Everything was arranged in front of him. And when he read the truth about it, Linda leaned over as it started to sink in. As she read with him, her smile grew wider. David, this is incredible. Precisely what David nodded slowly as needed. Feeling the weight of the offer starting to sink in his, it was more than he could have imagined. Wished for a genuine opportunity to further his financial status of the family, to provide a better life for them. And all because to a one deed of generosity, a moment that had appeared so insignificant and ordinary at the eye only offered assistance. David said, I just can't believe it. All I did in private was assist a young girl. Locate her parents. Linda gave his hand a light squeeze. That is the reality of life at times. Little things add up to huge things. You never know when a difference will occur. Of generosity will be returned to you in methods you never as anticipated. They sat there for a David's mind wandered back to, as they both become aware of how much this might alter their situation. David's thoughts turned back to his family. Alice, the lost youngster, was crying. Gaze in the manner in which she had grasped his hand when they passed through the mall, he was unable to avoid. I wonder if that small moment actually resulted in this. Or was it anything more significant? Something outside of his comprehending. But one thing was obvious. I wonder what that simple moment did. His actions' knock-on effects had began a new chapter in his life, and he had to make a choice immediately. An avalanche of ideas. The days that followed were packed with a flurry of ideas for David. He couldn't stop contemplating how unexpected the promotion offer was been and how everything may be altered by it for his a little hesitancy relatives. But there was considerable hesitancy about the promotion. Accountability, more hours, and more. Was he prepared for pressure? That during his subsequent shift, he discovered on his subsequent shift returned in the shopping center. Standing in his typical, there was a familiar ritual, that soothing beat to it, but suddenly it seemed as though something had changed. He continued to consider Alice, as she had appeared so tiny and terrified in the multitude of individuals, and how that particular moment had started a series of actions that he could never have forecasted. Halfway through his shift, he noticed something at the far end of the shopping center. Close to the entrance, a well-known Alice appeared as a figure, and next to she was walking with her folks. Beaming smiles on their faces as they approached him, and Alice had something in her hand. Hands. As they got closer, Alice's mother spoke as they got closer. Initially, David, we desire to return, and once again, thank you. You truly saved our lives. David grinned broadly that day. Feeling a little, David grinned broadly. The accolades I received made me feel ashamed. I'm just thrilled Alice is performing my job. All right. Alice's dad came out, and Alice's dad came forward. Agreed. Finding her wasn't the only goal. You were so considerate and polite to us. Been considering it ever since. David looked at Alice below, who was with the little box in her hand. She stared up into his brilliant eyes, and we quietly said, I made this for you. Giving him the present, David softly, she said upon accepting the delivery. I was taken aback by the motion. It was a tiny, well-wrapped ribbon-tied box. Thank you, but you remarked, I didn't have to do this. Gazing at Alice's mother grinned at us, and we wanted observing Alice's parents as a sign of our appreciation. Inquisitive David cautiously untied the tie and unlocked the package, which was snuggled inside. A tiny hand-painted image was found on tissue paper. It was a security guard figurine, maintaining a defensive posture while standing tall, and a small child held in his hand clung to him as Alice had clung to David. The specifics were straightforward that day. However, the significance of it was, for a moment, mighty David was unable to speak. Examining the figure, his throat constricted for a second as he take a look at this lovely figurine. I'm not sure what Alice's father nodded, and we simply desired the father gave a nod, to understand the significance of that moment. For us, it was more than simply identifying it was about your kindness, daughter. Demonstrated something we will always remember. David grinned and said, Thank you very much. David grinned. This holds great significance for me, as they bid me farewell, and David was standing there. David left after standing there for a pause while clutching the tiny doll in his hands, serving as a reminder of how strong a small deed of compassion could be. And as he gazed at the small form of the security guy, became aware of something. Perhaps this promotion wasn't, perhaps this was more than simply a work advancement. Perhaps it was the universe's method of letting him know that he was prepared to something more. His doubts were suddenly greater. All of a sudden, the uncertainties carrying started to diminish. He had been clinging to his routine's comfort, however. He recently saw that occasionally going into the unknown might result in something even more. David carefully inserted the figurine into his backpack and straightened up a bit. Feeling of direction descending upon him, that the choice had been made. His trip the following morning. David, the choice had already been made. Go calmly to the security office. He had given careful consideration to the promotion, and he was now prepared to offer his response as he walked into the office. He walked into the office. Harper had already arrived and was looking over some claims as David walked. He gazed up. It's fantastic to see that you've had a win. David walked. He looked up. Opportunity to consider the proposition, Mr. Harper inquired in his customary grave tone. Melted with David nodded in curiosity. David gave a confident nod. Without a doubt, sir, I have, and I would want to acknowledge the Mr. Harper's expression burst into a well done, David. Uncommon smile. Wise choice. David, I knew you were the ideal candidate for the David's employment, made him experience a sense of it was more than just a promotion. His chest grew full of pride. Although this wasn't merely a promotion, it marked a turning point in his life, an opportunity to develop and take on greater accountability, and to supply even more advantages for his thank you for believing in me. Family. Mr. Harper gave a nod. Silently, David whispered, I won't allow you. Mr. Harper nodded as he handed David a folder, including all of his new role. I'm confident you will perform admirably. You have always been trustworthy, and now you will have the chance to lead. As David left the workplace, feeling of achievement poured across, he felt lighter and more hopeful. Concerning the future, the concerns that had dragged him down and now appeared far away. David settled a few weeks later. As he considered how everything had transpired, he was forced to consider the impact of kindness, and how one tiny, seemingly unimportant deed had totally altered. As David settled a few weeks later, the position came with additional duties. Into the position of senior security, the position of supervisor came with additional obligations. But he discovered that he liked the challenge, and his self-assurance expanded along with his capacity to oversee the group. He experienced a renewed feeling of, he sensed a renewed intent, being aware that he was creating a distinction not only in his own life, but impacts the lives of persons in the vicinity. One night, he was standing by the main one night, as he stood mall's entrance, which looks over the midst of a busy crowd. He saw a familiar, it was Alice's face in the distance. Strolling alongside her parents, she smiled and waved at him once again. Broad and brimming with David waved his heart back with glee. Warm as he became aware of, he came to a significant life realization. Something significant happened in life, returning the favor to those who donated with, and sadly, he hadn't anticipated when he assisted. He received a raise or promotion. All he had wanted to do was Alice. All he had wanted to do was appropriate action. But occasionally the universe operates in enigmatic ways, rewarding those who would have thought, and the mall carried on with its typical rhythm. David stood silently surrounding him. Filled with, he was grateful to know that the path, it wouldn't always be simple to go ahead. But now he prepared for whatever would happen next. And he knew in my heart that being compassionate had the ability to alter lives. Adore this tale. Click the subscribe to Mystic Tales button to tell us more about how this story affected you. Feel free to use only one word in the comment section.